a bit shorter. And so two different tools, and we split up the questioning according to appropriateness. Okay, now, how do we effectively gather all this data? Actually, it was a huge crowd of analysts who were doing this for us, together with us, and in a very sort of very exciting way. Here are some of the analysts who are working from LSE, so you can see they have this kind of speakerphone. So why? Because we actually recorded every interview. Why do we do that? Well, it allows us to double score the information. So for 30% of all the interviews that we made, somebody else listened to the same interview and filled in the information in our access programming as well. Lots of what was the most important thing is to train all these guys, because some of them were based were working in Budapest, at some point in Timisoara as well, London, Stockholm. And the key to this is really that they all rate and kind of enter the data in a consistent fashion, right? So that there's no kind of rater, some weird rater differences. So we put a lot of time and effort into really training these people over Skype. We did a lot of mock interviews, all of them together, interviewing a person to make sure that they code the information in a similar, consistent fashion. So loads and loads of work, and Franziska can tell you a lot more about really the day-to-day management of just getting the data there is immense amount of work, but rewarding at the very end. So also, one thing is to make sure that the data is reliable and accurate. In terms of reliability, what we did is obviously we ensure confidentiality, so no names are mentioned ever. But we also made sure that people get something back. So after the first round of surveying, we all gave them the reports that you now have bundled all together. We all sent that back to them, and hopefully that was a somewhat rewarding kind of exchange. Very last slide, the outcome, and you'll learn more about what exactly we have in place. Now we have this panel, 2 rounds of data, and so here's some of the numbers. Of how many people are included. Overall, we reached out to about 600 organizations in total. Okay, so I'm out of time.
If there are any questions, this is your moment. Any questions? There's a microphone here.
Well, I would like the moderator to use my role. So I know we're out of time, and we have 5 more minutes. Okay, so I think this was a very nice introduction to the topic that we are gonna hear much more over the next 2 days. What I would like briefly to hear, because we heard the practitioner's perspective and we heard some views from the research. If you could maybe discuss, because our sample covered West Europe and East Europe, North and South divide. So are there any differences in the social enterprises that we have, like in UK and Spain, in comparison to Hungary and Romania? Because you also mentioned that the definition of a social enterprise is really contextual. And for example, these cotton diapers exist in the UK, but not, for example, in the Netherlands. And it's a social enterprise here now also in Croatia. So just something that, are there any differences in terms of legal structure, in terms of industries they focus on, in terms of revenues they generate between West Europe and East Europe?
Well, it's hard for me to answer because I don't know so well the Western market for social enterprise. I know much more the Central European and Latin American market. Well, I think in terms of, one of the differences is in terms of policy. Clearly, kind of the Western Europe was way ahead in terms of policy and social enterprise than in Central Europe. Even though it's starting to change in countries like Slovakia, where the governments are now starting to look at social enterprise and developing policy for that. I would say, they're still kind of looking at the West as replicating what's already existing in the West. So I think for me that's one key difference. What we've seen between Central Europe and Latin America, at least from our perspective, is the types of social enterprise on the ground, the types of issues they're trying to resolve, and the types of support and capacity building that they need is not so much different, actually. Whether you do a social enterprise locally in Brazil or you do one in Romania, in the end, it's still really difficult. And you still need access to capital and talent and to define a good product and to identify a business model. So that has not been a geographical difference.
One thing that's also that we've seen, particularly from the Spanish perspective, was the organizational forms they take. For instance, in Spanish environment context, presence of the cooperative traditionally has been existing there for the last 150 years. And there was a question now, how different is social entrepreneurship from what cooperatives have been doing for the last 100 years or so in Spain? And this was really, and it was one of the challenges we had to also to answer, how do we differentiate? Is it the cooperative that actually has a very strong social impact on the community where they operate a form of social entrepreneurship? And the other thing is also that many countries, I think, have different let's say social sectors where they focus. So in Spain, due to the high unemployment, integration of population that is at the risk of social exclusion is highly important. That might be not as important in some countries. Their unemployment might not be an issue. So the differences within Europe are pretty significant, I would say.
One obvious one that I can't believe I didn't think of that one is the capital. There's a lot more capital going to social enterprise in Western Europe than there is in Central Europe. Central Europe, literally, we've been extending loans to our portfolio of social enterprise in Romania and Hungary, the Czech Republic, and there's no one that we can turn to in terms of a bank or non-bank financial institution or an investment fund that is ready to extend debt to our social enterprise. So we've had to do it ourselves. So we had to kind of train our staff and become kind of loan officers. Whereas if you're in the UK, you have a lot of places to turn to. But it's changing in Central Europe, but still very, very far away.
Very, very briefly. So basically, if you look at the booklet that we produced, which bundles basically the summary of results for the 5 different countries, drawing on first wave data, you'll see the differences are huge, and they're very intriguing. So yes, the answer is yes, and that's really why we're doing these cross-country studies, so that we can learn more about those differences. Now, just on the financing bit, so yes, you do, when we compare, for instance, the mixture of where does the money come from in UK and Spain compared to Hungary and Romania, and I'll leave aside Sweden because it's a bit of an odd case, let's say, but UK and Spain, there you see a lot of more money is coming really from sales, just selling stuff in the market, being very market active in the market. That's actually the predominant source of capital. So if they need, in terms of where does the liquidity, cash day to day come from, it's coming from the services. And the next step, that's about more 20% is grants. Yeah. Now, if you look at Hungary, Romania, the peak is around grants. Yeah. So these social enterprises, they're really trying hard. So you see, they actually meet our 5% self-generating revenues through engaging in the market, but still, they by and far still rely on grants for an important part. And I think that fits right into, when you talk about 1997, when Nest was getting started, it was really about converting NGOs to think more as a social enterprise, and we see that still reflected today even. So it's not like we've wiped out, now all these guys are social entrepreneurs 100%. You still see a lot of reliance on the grant funding. So I think that mixture is interesting.
Thanks a lot. Do we have time for one more question? Yes, we do. And after that, it's a coffee break. And please, further questions are addressed to the panelists over coffee. Thank you.
So I'm Jacques Tavernier from European Federation of Ethical and Alternative Banks, and also from the University College of Kortrijk. So I'm always wondering about the definition of social economy. You are working in a European context. And what I was missing was the European definition. you have in the European Parliament, you had in 2009 a report Toya and a definition, European definition of what they call social economy. And you have also a definition of the European Economic and Social Committee, a little bit different from this of the European Parliament. But why do you don't use these definitions? They are very global. So that's right. So you have a lot of possibilities within it. And second element, if, and I think that's one of our objectives, if we want that the policymakers, the European level and the national and the regional levels, will support social economy, then these politicians, I am coming from this side, the politicians want to have not only a definition, but real criteria. So we have to come to criteria. And the more support you want from the from politics and from governments, the more clear the criteria have to be. So why, that's my real question, why you don't use the global definition of European Parliament and of the report Toya?
Thanks for that question. And of course, we've consulted this baggage of literature. It's not as if we are kind of working kind of side by side here. I think the way to think about our concept is that where we fit. So social economy has a huge tradition, is actually a very broad area of activity, economic activity, social activity. Social enterprise, as for our focus, or narrow focus, probably includes quite a bit that would fit under that umbrella of social economy, but it's a subset, but it's also larger. It includes stuff that maybe in the traditional social economy definition wouldn't have fit. Yeah. So for us, it was very important that they had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. Social economy, it's a very broad, diverse group. There's actors there who are much more using the NGO format to do what they want to achieve. But there are, of course, also in particular those organizations who are employing disadvantaged people. They are really just selling stuff. They would completely fit in our meet our criteria. So we've actually been specific about the criteria. We use 4. Yeah. So, but of course, it's because we want to look at a specific subset of enterprises. Yeah. So I think the way to think about it, social economy, is broad. It includes lots of different activity. It doesn't necessarily require activity to be active selling stuff in the market, whereas that's a criteria that we use. So, yeah. But of course, in terms of social mission and in terms of what the space that they're filling, there's a great overlap. That's for sure. Did anyone else?
Well, some of these criteria have to be operational. So, as we said at the beginning, there's no registry. So even if you would use these broad criteria, we want to focus on businesses. And if you are in a business register, then the business register should also adopt these criteria, such that when we open a business register, we can actually find these enterprises according to these criteria. So maybe that would be one recommendation if you really want to give some policy recommendations how better to access these enterprises, to find them, and to gather data about them. So thanks to our panelists. I think we started off this conference with a lot of interesting thoughts, and I invite you all for a coffee break.
We're going to be back at 11:50.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue. So may I please ask you again to take a seat, and please bear in mind that this conference is recorded. So again, I would like to ask you, if you haven't switched off your mobile phones yet, to do so now, and All right. I think I'm very, very honored that I think